Stand Up.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to yet another episode of Stand Up. We are just 1 week away from Election Day, and I am thinking good thoughts. I'm feeling good things. I think she's going to win. And I've got two great guests joining me on today's show. Both David Rothkopf and Jared Yates Sexton join me. My conversation with Rothkopf starts at 27 minutes, and my conversation with Jared begins at 1 hour, 8 minutes. Unfortunately, I don't have a news segment. I had a news segment, but it just disappeared. Catastrophic computer function failure last night, late in the night, and so I had to kind of start over. All good. I've got just a couple of sound clips for you. I lost the whole headline section. Very sorry about that. We'll get back after it right away, but I do have two great conversations coming your way, and I really am feeling very positive about what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. So much of what was in the news yesterday was a reaction conversation at what happened at Madison Square Garden on Sunday night with the hate rally that Trump headlined and had like 30 speakers at. Of course, so many controversial remarks were made, but the one that seemed to resonate, cut through, and potentially impact the outcome of the election was comedian Tony Hinchcliffe's comment that Puerto Rico is just a big garbage island in the middle of the ocean, or whatever he said. You heard it, but it potentially caused a lot of damage and created a lot of anger amongst the Puerto Rican American community, and many of them live in Philadelphia and other important cities and states that matter to this election. So is it possible that this comedian Tony Hinchcliffe actually affected the outcome of the election? One voter, apparently of Latino descent, went in DeKalb County in Georgia and said she needed to redo her vote after those comments. Of course, she can't do that, but she wanted her vote back. So that was so much of what the conversation was about yesterday. And a lot of folks were reaching out to me asking for my thoughts. A few people, as a comedian, what I thought about that. And I think it's better said by George Carlin here when talking to Larry King about Andrew Dice Clay and punching down.
I would defend to the death his right to do everything he does. The thing that I find unusual, and it's not a criticism so much, but his targets are underdogs. And comedy traditionally has picked on people in power, people who abuse their power. Women and gays and immigrants are kind of, to my way of thinking, underdogs. And, he ought to be careful because he's Jewish. And a lot of the people who want to pick on these kind of groups, the Jews are on that list a little further. You got women, gays, gypsies, blah, 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 and then suddenly you find Jews. And
suddenly Andrew's arrested.
Yeah. So, obviously he should do what he wants. And
why does he get away with it, do you think, then? Well, we have never laughed at jokes about the poor.
He's appealing. I think he's appealing largely. I think his core audience are young white males who are threatened by these groups. I think a lot of these guys aren't sure of their manhood because that's a problem when you're going through adolescence. Am I really? Could I be? I hope I'm not one of them. And the women who assert themselves and are competent are a threat to these men, and so are immigrants in terms of jobs and the.
So that's why we as an audience then will laugh.
You say we. I don't think you're.
But I think you're collective we.
I think that's what is at the core of that experience that takes place in these arenas. Is a certain, a sharing of anger and rage at these targets. And I'm sure Andrew isn't that angry at them. I'm sure he's playing it as a comic.
All right, there's George Carlin. Years ago, I thought that was so well said. And I also thought this was really interesting by comedian Anthony Jeselnik, who I know and like. He was talking to another comedian on a podcast, and this is his thoughts.
And all these comics now, it's like almost the point is to get in trouble. It's like, why are you giving me shit? I'm a comic. I'm allowed to say whatever I want. That's wrong, as far as I'm concerned. Art.
Oh, wait, say it again so I don't miss it.
People think like, as a comic, your job is to get in trouble. And so, but they don't want to get yelled at. It's like, it's okay to make people mad, but they don't want any pushback. And I think that's wrong. As a comedian, you want to make people laugh. This is a quote attributed to Andy Warhol that I love. It's just, art is getting away with it. If you put out a special and everyone's pissed, like you didn't get away with it. You need to make everyone laugh that they're like, yeah, you talked about some fucked up stuff, but we're all happy. That's art. Otherwise, you're just a troll.
Yeah, otherwise, you're just a troll. I really like that from Anthony Jeselnik. And I thought this was good from Mark Maron, who posted a statement. I'll just read it to you. He's an elder statesman in comedy now, of course, a leftist or a progressive. I don't know how he identifies, but he's always been a very, very liberal, progressive guy and a smart, thoughtful guy. And Maron writes about this. The anti-woke flank of new fascism is being driven almost exclusively by comics, my peers. Whether or not they are self-serving or true believers in the new fascism is unimportant. They are the movement. Whether they see themselves as acolytes or just comics doesn't matter. Whether they are driven by the idea that what they are fighting for is free speech issue or whether they are truly bankrupt racists doesn't matter. They are part of the public face of a fascist political movement that seeks to destroy the democratic idea. When comedians with podcasts have shameless, self-proclaimed white supremacists and fascists on their show to joke around like they're just entertainers or even just politicians, all it does is humanize and normalize fascism. When someone uses their platform for that reason, they are facilitating anti-American sentiment and promoting violent autocracy. I love that statement. It's clearly thought out and probably influenced by my friend Brendan McDonald, who produces Mark Maron's show. I'm guessing I'm hearing his voice in that statement too, but I love it. Really very important statement. Yesterday, also more resignations from the Washington Post. 2 more editorial board members resigned, and now it's like a third of the editorial board has resigned. They've lost 200,000 subscribers, but yet USA Today is following in the footsteps or in the path of the LA Times and the Washington Post and not endorsing someone for president, which is pretty bad news yesterday. Oh, and I just got to play you this horrible moment on CNN yesterday where Mehdi Hasan was talking on panel with Abby Phillips' show, and this guy, Ryan Girdusky, and he argues, I think it speaks for itself. It's pretty much as bad as it gets, and here it is.
If you don't want to be called Nazis, stop doing...
You're called an anti-Semite more than anyone else at this table.
Yeah.
And people will sit there and... No, by me. I never called you an anti-Semite. Okay. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying...
I'm a supporter of the Palestinians, so I'm used to it.
Yeah, I hope your beeper doesn't go off. The thing is that...
Did you just say I should die?
You should not...
No,
did you just say I should be killed?
No, I did not say that. No, I did not say that.
Hold on.
Did your guest just say I should be killed on live TV?
I said I hope
you're... Guys, let me just stop.
You said you hope my beeper doesn't go off.
Because you said I'm a big supporter
of the Palestinians.
Of Hamas.
Guys, let me stop.
Palestinians.
Are you a supporter
of
Hamas?
What? No, of course I'm not.
I apologize.
Are you a racist, violent person inciting violence against
Ryan,
That's
disgusting. That is completely...
No, I apologize.
Good job, CNN. Let's have first block say the Muslim guy should be blown up on TV.
Don't say then I apologize. You literally...
I thought he said Hamas.
You didn't think I said Hamas. I said I supported Palestinian rights.
Yes, I did.
Why? Because when you hear
What's funny is Rudy Giuliani said this yesterday, so you're a great guest to be here to defend Rudy Giuliani.
Give me...
All right. Well, there's too much crosstalk, I think, for you to hear it. But yeah, it was real bad. That was really bad. And when they came back, both Girdusky, the guy who said, I hope your beeper doesn't go off, and Mehdi Hasan were not there. And Abby Phillips apologized to her audience. And it was, wow. You just got to see it. The guy was terrified after he said it too. He realized what he had done, and he just had that face on that you realize you just blew your chance to be a television news panelist celebrity. And that guy's got a crazy history, and so that blew up last night on CNN. And also, Mehdi Hasan went viral for another reason. He had a pretty big day on social media because of his appearance at a SiriusXM panel that was being hosted by Piers Morgan, and Sarah Palin was on that panel with Mehdi Hasan, and so was this guy Destiny, who I've been watching and really like on YouTube. But listen to this 2 minutes between Sarah Palin and Mehdi Hasan during this panel yesterday.
You're a liar. You're a liar. You lied.
I'm a liar.
Yes, and you said, no, Biden didn't do that. Yes, he did on day one.
Do you know he handed out more licenses to Trump? Do you know that?
I'm making the point that you denied. My point is true.
Destiny said energy's higher, and you said no. So if anyone lied, you did.
Listen.
People can DVR it, they can rewind it and see you saying a false statement to discredit energy production higher. Is energy production higher today?
You don't think that Biden
is energy production higher under Biden than Trump?
And you just
is energy production higher, Sarah Palin? It's a very simple question.
I
know facts are not your strong point. Is energy production higher today under Biden than under Trump? It's a simple yes or no question.
You're an obnoxious...
See, but the issue
facts don't care about your feelings.
Are Americans wrong when they have this feeling? Well, the feelings
I'm
oftentimes are
obnoxious
generated
because I asked
from
if energy production's higher today than under Trump.
You're
that makes me
obnoxious
obnoxious
because I'm asking you why you would say that Biden didn't thwart.
You're a racist. We want to play that game? You said Obama is not born in America. He's not one of us.
I said that?
Yeah, you said Trump is doing a great job asking for his birth certificate. You said he's not one of us. You said he jives and schmucks. Should we go down the record? You're going to call me obnoxious? Why don't you talk about your racism?
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about your racism?
Why do you change the subject?
You said Black Lives Matter protesters are dogs. Should we go down?
I said they're dogs.
All right,
You're
hang
a
on.
liar.
All right,
Show me where I ever said that protesters
It's funny you didn't deny the Obama. You say Obama's shocking judge.
You're a liar.
Mehdi, if you get the governor on your show, which is, I would say, unlikely as things stand, if you do, you can continue the prosecution. Let me just segue to this, though, because it's interesting.
I called people dogs who were protesting in America. You're a liar.
Did you question Obama's birth?
Oh my goodness!
Did you say he's not one of us? Did you say he's palling around with terrorists?
Based on that, we're talking about Bill Ayers at the time and how Obama had kicked off.
You're standing by Obama's with terrorists.
Oh my goodness! I can't believe you
even have a show. Did you say he's not one of us? Did you say Obama's not one of us?
I still want to know this proof that you have of me calling protesters in America dogs.
All right, there is a Washington Post headline that is on the end of that clip that says, Sarah Palin called Black Lives Matter protesters dogs. So Mehdi Hassan had the best day ever yesterday, and I can't imagine what it felt like for him to be on CNN and had that guy say that, but I hope he realizes how important he has been in the conversation this year and his entire career. I have a lot of respect for that guy. I've never interviewed him. I've never met him. I don't know why. I should. I'll try, but there you go. All right, well, President Obama was out on the campaign trail, and I love this thing that he had to say about fake macho losers, in my opinion.
And I've noticed this especially with some men who seem to think Trump's behavior is somehow a sign of strength. Sort of the macho, fake macho thing, and, I'm here to tell you that's not what real strength is. It never has been. Real strength's about working hard. Real strength's about taking responsibility. Real strength is about telling the truth even when it's inconvenient. Real strength is about being confident enough to treat everybody with dignity and respect. Real strength is about helping people who need it and standing up for those who can't always stand up for themselves. That is what we should want in our daughters and our sons, and that is what I want to see in the next president of the United States of America. And the good news is that you have candidates to vote for in this election who demonstrate that kind of character, who know what real strength looks like, who will set a good example and do the right thing and leave this country better than they found it. And Pennsylvania, that is the choice in this election. It's not just policies that are on the ballot, it's who we are and what we stand for. So whether this election is making you feel excited or scared or hopeful or frustrated or anything in between, do not sit back. Don't just hope for the best. Get off your couch and vote. Put down your phone and vote. Vote for Kamala Harris as the next president. Vote for Tim Walz as the next vice president.
There you go. There he was yesterday campaigning for Kamala Harris. And I also thought this was really important and pretty good, too, yesterday. President Obama making fun of or calling out the MAGA hate rally.
We saw it last night. I know nobody's going to boo now. All you're going to do is vote. Hold on a second. So the man holds this big rally at Madison Square Garden. And the warm-up speakers were saying the most, we're trotting out and peddling the most racist, sexist, bigoted stereotypes. One guy called Puerto Rico, quote, an island of garbage. Now, these are fellow citizens he's talking about. Here in Philadelphia, they are your neighbors. They are your friends. They are your co-workers. Their kids go to school with your kids. These are Americans. They're people. And that is the reason why this election should not be close. It should be clear. Here's a good rule. If somebody does not respect you, if somebody does not see you as fellow citizens with equal claims to opportunity, to the pursuit of happiness, to the American dream, you should not vote for them.
Yeah.
You should not expect them to make your life better. They will not help you make they will not help you pay the bills. They're not gonna work hard to make sure your kid gets a good education. They're not gonna help you with a down payment on a house. I mean, we have to reject the kind of politics of division and hatred that we saw represented. America's ready to turn the page. America's ready for a better story. Philadelphia, we are ready for a president, Kamala Harris.
Yeah, we certainly are, and we're going to see it. I'm telling you, we're going to see it. All right, here is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on Morning Joe, MSNBC, talking about the hate rally.
So, Congressman, last night, right here in New York City, your hometown, Donald Trump held a packed rally at Madison Square Garden, and a number of speakers used downright racist and offensive language, no more so than the so-called comedian who said that Puerto Rico was an island of garbage. Can you just give us your reaction to what you heard last night, just hours and hours of frankly, hate, and what, frankly, how it could electrify this electorate?
Well, there's a couple of things. As you mentioned, this was a hate rally. Mm-hmm. This was not just a presidential rally. This was also not just a campaign rally. I think it's very important for people to understand that these are mini January 6 rallies. These are mini Stop the Steal rallies. These are rallies to prime an electorate into rejecting the results of an election if it doesn't go the way that they want. Because Donald Trump and that entire cadre of people up on that stage, Stephen Miller, etc., do not respect the law of the United States of America. And they either want to win this election or they are using rhetoric of taking it by force. Mm-hmm. That is what they mean, and that's what they're doing when they are inciting violence and hatred against Latinos, against Black Americans, against Americans who don't have children, you have J.D. Vance literally talking about watering down people's right to vote, depending on if they can viably carry a child or not. We have to understand how unhinged this campaign has gotten, and the only reason that the rhetoric has gotten this far is precisely because they are trying to prime the kind of froth that led up to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Mm-hmm. And so it's very important that we connect those dots. And right now the campaign is scrambling, and they're trying to blame this rhetoric on a so-called comedian. This is not a comedian. This is the Trump campaign. They invited this rhetoric on their stage for a reason. It was a chorus of speakers on that campaign for a reason. It was vetted, and they knew exactly who was going to say what before they went on. And so the only backtracking that they're doing right now is just because tens of thousands of Puerto Ricans happen to live in Philadelphia, Florida, Michigan, Wisconsin, and also the several swing seats in the House of Representatives that run through the state of New York, and they're just realizing that they might have made a big error by saying out loud what they're thinking.
Yeah, AOC nailing it on MSNBC yesterday. Let's head over to ABC's The View, where Sunny Hostin, who is also Puerto Rican, had something to say.
This Puerto Rican has something to say about the island that I love, where my family is from. Puerto Rico is trash. We are Americans, Donald Trump. Americans. We voluntarily serve disproportionately high in the military, while you have bone spurs. And we vote. Pennsylvania is home to almost 500,000 Puerto Ricans. North Carolina, 115,000. Georgia, 100,000. Arizona, 64,000. Wisconsin, 61,000. Michigan, 43,000. Nevada, 27,000. We vote Donald Trump. Trash. And by the way, Jennifer Lopez, Ricky Martin, Bad Bunny, Luis Fonsi, and Mark Anthony have over 345 million followers on Instagram. I think you only have 26 million, since you care so much about size. And we don't like what was said about Puerto Rico. And we know how to take the trash out, Donald Trump. Trash that has been collecting since 2016. And that's you, Donald Trump. My fellow Puerto Ricans, Trash Collection Day is November 5th, 2024.
Oh, shit. Trash Collection Day, huh? How about that? And also, Ana Navarro went off on Trump and that rally as well. She didn't much care for that. This is also on The View yesterday. She's Cuban, but here it is.
Today when I was leaving the hotel, there was a woman there. And she started talking to me about this rally. And I said to her, are you Puerto Rican? And she said to me, no. But today, we are all Puerto Ricans.
Right.
And so I want to say, and he didn't just make jokes about Puerto Ricans.
No, he did.
He made jokes about blacks. Yep. You know, the whole trope about watermelons. He made jokes, a vile joke about Latinos that we can't even put on daytime TV. Yep. So today we are all in this together. And I'm going to say this particularly to my Latino community. If Trump asking for the death penalty for 5 young men of color, black and Latino, the exonerated 5 wasn't enough for you. If Trump getting investigated for refusing to rent to black people wasn't enough for you. If Trump promoting a racist trope against the first black president with the birtherism wasn't enough for you. If Trump calling Mexicans rapists and criminals and bad hombres wasn't enough for you. If Trump calling us vermin, invaders, people who poison the blood of this country wasn't enough for you. If Trump throwing paper towels at people in need after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico wasn't enough for you. If Trump saying immigrants have made this country into the trash can of the world wasn't enough for you, then maybe, just maybe, this comedian, handpicked, chosen, vetted by the Trump campaign because he reflects what Trump has said his entire lifetime, maybe that will be enough for you. And on November 5th, I want you to vote for your heritage and your traditions and your identity. I want you to vote with dignity and self-respect. Latinos, comunidad, si ustedes tienen respeto por su...
All right. I don't know what she's saying. I don't speak Spanish. Sorry about that. I didn't have any subtitles either. But now finally, let's go to the jokes. It's Jimmy Kimmel on ABC's Jimmy Kimmel Live last night.
Cleo and I went to the game on Friday night. It was one of the best games ever. Dodgers won on a walk-off grand slam home run. And it's interesting because people were hugging each other, strangers, in the night, exchanging glances. Really, it was nice to see people united, especially because we are 1 week away from finding out which members of our families won't be invited to Thanksgiving dinner. You would think, I have to say, at this point, you would think that Trump and company would be on their very best behavior, cruising into. That is not what's happening at all. The Big Orange Circus came to Madison Square Garden last night. The clueless Klux Klan showed up in force for what I think may have been the nuttiest Trump event of all time, and that includes the press conference he had last week to talk about Arnold Palmer's penis. This was supposed to be Trump's closing argument to voters. It felt more like Kamala Harris's closing argument to voters. It was ugly, it was mean, it was hateful, it was racist, anti-Semitic, it was stupid. They really pissed off Puerto Ricans to the point where Bad Bunny had to get involved, and that's when you know you got a problem. Trump made such a mess with Puerto Ricans, they're now throwing paper towels at him. In this event, all the stars of the Third Reich were there, including Trump's attorney, Alina Habba, who made quite an entrance.
All I do is win, win, win. And then she comes in dancing, shaking her ass all over the place, and so he makes this joke.
Melania, this is my lawyer. I mean, and that's the choice of song. All I do is win, win, win. She represented him in court. He lost. He had to pay $83 million. She wins cases the same way he wins elections. Not. It was a motley crew of speakers. But while, you know, Trump may not have had a Beyonce or Bruce Springsteen like his opponent did, but he was able to book a Hulk Hogan who at age 71 is having a bit of trouble tearing off his shirts.
And then Hogan really, I didn't notice this, but Hogan really struggles to get the shirt off, and then he's got the Trump MAGA shirt under it, but it's real bad.
Yeah, well, you know, I warned him not to wear the beefy tee, but nobody listens. You know you're getting old when you lose a wrestling match to your tank top. But that wasn't the most awkward appearance of the night, and quite far from it. There were a number of contenders for the clown crown, including Elon Musk, who won the crowd over with his natural charm.
The future is gonna be amazing! You guys are awesome. Honestly, this is like... USA! 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 Ah! Yes!
You know, he's just so likable. That's the thing. He's so lifelike. You'd never know he was made of discarded vibrator parts. And then we had an appearance from the always very normal and not at all ferret-like Tucker Carlson, who had the pleasure of following a man with a brainworm.
Just another day following Bobby Kennedy Jr. at a Donald Trump rally in Madison Square Garden.
What the fuck? He is so weird. It was so weird. That's Jimmy Kimmel, and now I'm back, and that's just... It was so weird. If you watch any of that rally, it was so cringe and uncomfortable and wackadoodle, and there you go. All right, that's all the clips I got for you. That's the opening. I can't believe that I had a whole nother show, and it didn't work out. So hopefully you like this, and it makes some sense. Now it's time to get to my conversation with David Rothkopf. And then after that, I've got an awesome one with Jared Yates Sexton. Both of them. I caught up with them on Monday. It's awesome. But starting with Rothkopf, you got to read and subscribe to his Substack. Need to know, Rothkopf.substack.com. Listen to him on Deep State Radio. Follow him on social media. Read him at the Daily Beast. Get his books. You've been Rothkopf. And by the way, wait till the end when we start talking about pajamas and it gets weird and then it gets good again. And I hope that you'll stay through the end of that interview and for my interview with Jared Yates Sexton coming up right after. There he is, our good friend David Rothkopf. I had to talk to you this week. I'm very happy to see you. Thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Did you watch the rally at the Madison Square Garden?
Oh, yes. I even wrote about it.
I know. I read it, and it's really good. And you have a lot of concerns, obviously, and I wanted to get to them. But my question is, how much should we be talking about it when it seems like this is why they had it, so that we would talk about it and distract us? Is it a distraction, or is it something we should be centrally focused on?
It's not something we should be centrally focused on. We should be centrally focused on electing Kamala Harris president in a week. I think it was a big mistake. I think ultimately the rally that Trump did is going to hurt him more politically than it helps him. I think it solidified all the fascism stories of the prior week, not to mention the prior several years. Yeah. The Milley story and the Kelly story and the Kelly story in the New York Times, the Kelly story in the Atlantic, and so forth. And I think going to the site of infamous Nazi rally, or at least nominally the site of an infamous Nazi rally, just calls up the question. And there were some people, including myself, who know about the earlier rally, watched video of the earlier rally, and were able to put them side by side and say, is this worse? Is this the same? Is it a mistake to compare the two? And I think they completely undermined their argument that it was over the top to compare the two, because it was a fascistic rally. There were people there saying, like Vivek Ramaswamy said, we've got to take civil servants and deport them. And one guy said, we've got to slaughter the Democrats. And another person, Trump, talked about the enemy within again. And then everybody said something racist. It was like the price of admission was he had to stand on the stage and make some outrageous ethnic slur. And the original Nazi rally, very anti-Semitic, obviously attacking the U.S. government, but used many of the same themes. They talked about themselves as the only real true patriots. They said they wanted to return America to Americans. Stephen Miller, he has that kind of Himmler-esque style of presenting himself, and he was kind of, America is for Americans and only for Americans.
Yeah, that's right out of the...
It's directly out of the Nazi playbook. At the end of the day, that was bad. And then finally, I have respect for you, I'm not going to call this guy a comedian, but this guy who spoke and said Puerto Rico was a floating island of garbage in a state with 1 million Puerto Ricans, in a city with 600,000 Puerto Ricans, when there are 500,000 Puerto Ricans in Florida and 400,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. Really dumb, really dumb. You can speak to the question of whether he was actually a comedian or not better than I can.
I don't know if it was some kind of Andy Kaufman play or if he was trying to damage Trump or if he was just that tone deaf. But Tony Hinchcliffe is a really well-respected comic in certain circles. He's a good buddy of Joe Rogan's, and apparently Joe Rogan told the Trump campaign that they should hire him to write jokes. He's a very successful guy, and he just became potentially pivotal as a result of his comments. Good luck getting out of New York alone. You write at the Daily Beast, from a political perspective, the strategy is pure suicide. The rally will almost certainly alienate more voters who might have voted for Trump. It's hard to imagine it's earned him one single new vote. So that would be a good thing then.
Yeah, you didn't go to the parenthetical remark after one single new vote, which was a reference to the producers.
Unless there is a Franz Liebkind somewhere who's been too busy writing Springtime for Hitler to have paid attention to the campaign until now. It was a play.
Thank you.
It was a play to the base when the biggest problem Trump has in this election is breaking through his rock-solid ceiling of around 47% of the electorate. He's stuck there.
Yeah, I think that's right. He didn't gain any votes, and I'm pretty sure he lost votes. Yesterday happened to be the day Kamala Harris rolled out her Puerto Rico strategy.
Yeah.
So looks worse. Now you've got Bad Bunny and J-Lo and Ricky Martin all having
with a combined
endorsed Kamala Harris.
1 billion followers on Instagram or something. All
some crazy number. Bad Bunny alone that's one of those consequential endorsements from the pop culture world, like Taylor Swift or Beyonce, and it's a big deal.
So, talking a little bit about that rally, and you've written about that at the Daily Beast, Donald Trump's racist New York City rally was vile. It was also political suicide. But over at your Substack, where I'm a subscriber, Need to Know by David Rothkopf, if you're not subscribing, you're not reading it, you're missing out on a very important and unique perspective. But you write about the secret strengths that will ensure Kamala Harris and the Democrats win in 2 weeks. And you say that basically, in the end, it's about how to get out the vote. And it would seem that the Harris-Walz campaign has a very well-funded, very organized get out the vote effort in the places it needs to have. Where would you critique it, or what would you say about why it matters so much more?
I wouldn't critique it right now because so far they seem to be doing the right things in the right places. They're going to these places. They've got a big ground game in these places. It's been there for a while. They've raised much more money than Trump. They have the ability to spend much more money in the final week of this campaign than Trump. And importantly, I think they've got very significant numbers of lawyers in place to brush back challenges that are certain to continue to come from Trump and company. So I think they're very well positioned. I think she's going to win, and I think she's going to win by more than most people project.
Yeah, I feel that way too, but that's basically your thought based on how organized they are in terms of canvassing, et cetera.
No, it's not just based on that. It's based on early voting showing very substantial gender gap, like 55-45 at women, and women are very heavily leaning towards Harris. I think that are still in the post-Roe period,
right,
where polls are undercounting women turning out, their sense of commitment to these things. And you recall in 2022, the talk was all of the red wave, and that did not manifest itself. And I think the talk here is all of a tie. And I also think that there's enough polls that show the national race is 3-4 points she's ahead. But I don't think they're counting all the Republicans who are going to vote for Kamala Harris. And I don't think they're counting all the Republicans who are going to sit on their hands and not vote for Donald Trump. And so if you take the sort of silent, or as I put it in one of the substacks, the invisible electorate, the people polls don't see because polls are weighted based on the assumptions of the pollsters about who's going to turn out. And you take the results that we've seen very consistently. She's never been behind since she entered the race, really. She's always been tied or she's been a little bit ahead. And you take the amount of money she has and the number of donations and the number of people who show up at rallies and the number of volunteers, all of those things suggest to me she has an edge.
I think that's right. That's what I'm seeing and hearing too. How about Elon Musk? You've written about him for years and his outsized influence, especially here in this last third of the campaign, both donating all the money, but putting his face everywhere, speaking, and then obviously taking over Twitter and doing all kinds of things. And then it would seem most frighteningly, we found out that Trump has been talking to Putin, and so has Elon Musk, like this trio of very wealthy men. It could be 1 and 2 with Musk and Putin. What do you think about his role and everything he's doing?
I think nothing Elon Musk does is not transactional and it's not self-interested. He wants to enrich himself further. He's got very important contracts with the government. He wants to increase those. I think he's got a lot of exposure with the government. I think a number of government agencies are investigating his business practices. But he's got more exposure, we've learned in the past week. He came to this country illegally. He stayed in this country illegally. He started his business without having the right kind of visa and so forth. And you might say that's trivia. But he's got a top secret clearance. And in order to get a top secret clearance, you have to swear to certain representations you make about yourself and your life. And I think if it is in fact found that he lied about his citizenship status, he could lose the top secret clearance. He could be investigated by the government. He could lose his government contracts. It could have a big negative impact on his businesses. And that's not idle speculation. That's the reality. Right. And I think one of the reasons he's so gung-ho pro-Trump is that there's a lot of risk for him if Trump is not the president. And Trump will just give him carte blanche. Musk doesn't know anything. Musk is an idiot. And he says things like, I'll get rid of a third of the government. He doesn't know how many people work in the government. Right. He doesn't know how the government works. But he was the richest man in the world, except if you count Putin, who we don't know as much about his wealth, but who may be. But he's the richest man in the world. And he has demonstrated time and time again that he's not loyal to the United States. He's done some big favors for the Russians at the expense of the United States. He's not loyal to anyone but himself. You should see the tweets that his daughter puts out about him. She just launched another barrage today.
Oh, I didn't even know. I didn't know his daughter that he is estranged from, who is trans. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I didn't follow that. I didn't realize it.
Yeah, just go Google her tweets. Absolutely brutal assault on him, and saying he's a traitor, and saying the people who support him are traitors. And he's just giddy. Oh, this is just the greatest thing that ever happened. When in fact, his association with what is likely to be a failed presidential campaign, a corrupt candidate, one who actually may end up going to jail, you think that's going to help his businesses?
Quite a gamble.
It's a crazy gamble, but there's a lot of that going on. And that's why we're in this kind of world of the LA Times and the Washington Post.
I wanted to ask you about that next. But to be clear, when you talk about the exposure he has, there's legal issues. He could put himself and his businesses in real danger if he doesn't have control.
On that and a bunch. I think I saw someplace that there's 6 or 7 different government agencies investigating different companies of his too. So he's got all sorts of exposure.
Explains his interest, and we can talk about the interests of the Washington Post owner, Jeff Bezos, and the owner of the LA Times, who is a pharmaceutical guy who needs the FDA on his side, and we can talk about their interests. But I wanted to get your reaction to just what you think it means for these giant legacy newspapers, even though they're obviously changed over the years. But the LA Times, Washington Post, not endorsing a candidate. This is a real, I feel like it's a very big development, something worth mentioning, discussing. Just want to get your thoughts on it.
I think it's a big development on a number of fronts. First of all, these billionaires don't own these publications to make a living from them. They don't care. And they're doing it for exposure or to advance their own political agenda. And so upholding journalistic ethics or responding to the needs of readers is not really what they're about. They expect to lose money. I think the Washington Post lost $100 million last year. Now, having said that, these people are cowards, and they're afraid that Trump might come in, and if the papers took a stance that was adverse to him, that he might punish them. And this is, as countless numbers of people have said, in the words of historian Timothy Snyder at Yale, this is giving permission in advance to Trump, when he becomes president, to behave in the way they expect him to behave. And so it's extremely dangerous. It's also, I think, akin to saying, I don't like either candidate, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein. And the people out there, they say that kind of nonsense. That means they're supporting Trump. This is just closet support for Trump. Right. Lisa Murkowski, senator from Alaska, said today, I'm not going to support either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. I'm going to write in somebody else. That means she's supporting Donald Trump. Right. Because any vote that comes away from Kamala Harris hurts her candidacy. And in the case of these places, I think the expectation was, based on their reporting, that they would endorse Kamala Harris because they have reported on the threat of Donald Trump for months and years. And if that is in fact the case, then what they're doing is behaving in a way that's going to be perceived as particularly negative for her, not neutral, but negative for her. And Trump will make hay out of that. Trump supporters will make hay out of that. And no doubt these Bezos and the others will come around to Trump a little later and say, hey, baby, I delivered. So look, I got this problem. I don't want to pay Amazon employees or whatever. And we're gonna end up with a country that has essentially been bought by a little coterie of billionaires. And that we are going to be like Russia, a country that is in the thrall and the control of an oligarchy.
You touched on a couple of these things already in our conversation here, but you have this really interesting piece at your Substack, The Invisible Electorate, and other big stories many are missing, including one that is much, much bigger than the U.S. elections. Give us a preview of that, and everybody should go read and subscribe, of course.
I covered a number of things in that one. Which was the one that was much, much bigger?
You mentioned, let me just go through them really quick, the invisible electorate, the myth of Trump's support for Jews, the true dangers of Musk, which I think we touched on, the Trump MAGA Bund, and then most ominously, when systems break down.
Yeah, I think that what happens is I've touched on some of those things already, but when systems break down, this is just something that's been on my mind. And that
I
is,
wanted you to flesh it out.
We have seen in the course of our lives times when people test the limits of systems. People who are successful within them and powerful within them start acting with a degree of impunity and with a degree of greed, and they push the limits. And in the 1980s, you had the era of Michael Milken and greed is good, and they started bending the rules of Wall Street or go into gray areas where there weren't any rules, and they tried to get rich by playing a little bit outside a lot of the tech bros have done this in terms of building their companies in places that are not regulated and push back on the regulation. And we've seen it happen earlier also in the Great Depression and so forth. But the point is that systems typically push back. That ultimately people say you can't go this far, and we're going to ultimately they overreach, and some authority comes in and says, but sometimes people take over the whole system. Their greed and their ambition leads to take over the whole system. And it's not that those never fall. Hitler is gone. Mussolini is gone. Ivan the Terrible is gone. They're bad autocrats throughout history that ultimately were gone. But the cost of them, not just breaking the system, but taking it over and perverting it to their objectives is much, much bigger than mere avarice. Is much, much bigger than mere avarice. Because people lose their freedoms, people lose their lives, country loses its identity, the country loses its competitive strengths. Other countries will step up and fill in the void that's created when the country falters under the weight of the ego or egos of a small group of people who take it over. And that's the risk of where we are right now, that this system can break down where Trump and Musk and Putin and Bezos and the other little group of billionaires, that the one remaining Koch and the guys who are funding the Federalist Society and so forth, if they take over the whole system and elections stop mattering and the rules start getting written so that only white Christian men have advantages and a few businesses, the biggest ones, have special advantages, we could be in for a very long, very painful, dark chapter in American history, and arguably, conceivably, the final chapter.
The final chapter. Ba-da-ba-ba. Sorry, I just had to bring a little joy.
I inspired you to sing every time I'm on your show.
So finally, what did you think that what do you think Trump and Mike Johnson have up their sleeve? What was that all about when Trump said, we've got a little secret, everybody's going to find out about it after? And so now everybody's speculating, which is what he wants us to do.
Don't know. I suspect Trump has talked to him about the House not certifying the election results. I think anybody who thinks November 6th, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be done with all of this and it's going to go one way or the other way and it'll all be done. you are living in a dream world. No matter what the result is, it will be contested, heavily contested, contested for weeks, potentially contested for months. And unfortunately, I think there's a legitimate prospect that Kamala Harris could win the election. She's certainly going to win the popular vote. I don't think there's any question about that. Democrats always win the popular vote, but because we have this insanely antiquated, twisted system of the Electoral College, could be closer there. But I think they'll contest it, that there will be violence. I think that it's possible that if the Democrats don't control the House of Representatives, that the House of Representatives will just take Trump's side. And if they don't accept the election results for some reason, or they conclude the election results are tied, they can vote on who's the next president. The House is the next group that gets to do that. And the problem is, even with a Democratic majority in the House, the way it works is that they vote by state delegation, and there are going to be more Republican state delegations than Democratic state delegations. Now, the Democrats control things, and they are in office January 3rd. They can control the rules and how the House functions, and they may be able to influence this. As a friend of mine who is a wise person said, to me, the election is not over until Inauguration Day, and I see who takes the oath of office.
Right. Who was that friend of yours? I'm sorry. Describe what their background was. I'm sorry, you cut out.
That they're just a friend who's actively involved in this kind of business.
All right. I guess then on election night, we hope that Kamala Harris wins. The very next thing is we hope that Democrats take back over the House, so they would be sworn in before Inauguration Day and have the ability to confirm the result of the election the way our democracy is supposed to work. And then there's the Supreme Court.
Yeah, they're a great bunch of guys.
What are you doing?
Can really count on them to do
Will you be doing
the right
election
thing.
night? Do you have any plans and programs? Is Deep State Radio doing anything? Where will you be? How can we find you?
I would just sitting in my pajamas.
Okay, well, I'm going to be hosting a thing. If you're not doing anything, I hope that you'll stop in.
I've hosted things on election eve. Back in the days when elections were resolved on election eve.
Yeah.
It's going to be fucking frustrating because you're going to be there sitting talking, and then somebody's going to go, we won't hear from Wisconsin until Thursday. And then somebody's going to go, these ballots in North Carolina because of the hurricane are contested. And then blah, 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 blah. And Trump will at 9 or 10 o'clock walk out, stand in front of a camera, and no matter what happens, and he will say, I declare victory. As the polls showed all along, I was in the lead, and I look forward to becoming your president again, and I'll be on the phone to Putin and Netanyahu tomorrow to start meddling in our foreign policy. And the narrative for him and his people, and one of the reasons he does these big events like he did at Madison Square Garden, where he riles up the base, is to do what he did on January 6th. And to say, if they declare her the winner, they're stealing it from me. They're cheating. It's not fair. It's rigged. We've got to fight. They're stealing our country from us, which is why the only possible way of calming that, and it's a long shot even in that case, is for everybody to vote, everybody to get their family to vote, their friends to vote, call up people they don't even know that well, ask them if they know how to vote, drive people to vote, give money. Be out there, because right now the election is not any longer about who's going to persuade who. People know who they're going to vote about. It's who's going to get off their ass and vote, who hasn't already voted. And if enough people do that, Kamala Harris can win by a big enough margin that it's going to be real hard for Trump to do this kind of thing. And that's our hope as a country, not to be just pushed into 2 or 3 months of uncertainty, chaos, and unhappiness.
Yes, indeed. I look forward to watching the results play out with you or without you, pajamas or not. So.
Yeah, you don't want to see me in my pajamas.
I do.
But
they have a button. I bet you they're buttoned down with a collar.
Yeah, I don't own pajamas.
Oh, okay.
I haven't had pajamas since I was 10 years old.
Me neither. A good friend of mine, wears them every night. He has button-down pants and shirt and pants, and he travels with pajamas. Like he puts them in his luggage. I'm like, man, it's so weird.
And my wife has tried this whole thing to get me to do that, and she gave me these pajamas that have little dogs all over them. But the thing about pajamas is, and this is an important issue because you talk about important issues, but they ride up on your calves.
Yeah.
And so you wake up at 3 a.m. and your lower leg is being strangulated. I find that really uncomfortable.
The most uncomfortable thing I've ever worn to bed was fetid pajamas as a child. Do you remember those? Those were the most constraining, horrible. It's like a torture outfit, those things. Those are gone, I think, but they had the sandpapery.
No, people love those. People, even there are adults who wear those. Fashion. Did you have a little flap in the back?
Oh, never had that. No, if you had to go, you went. We were little, though.
I understand that. My daughters, when they were little girls, they had those little onesies. Wow. That's
shocking to me.
Why? Everybody has that. Didn't your daughters have onesies?
Yeah, they had onesies, but I'm talking about fetid pajamas with feet, like a one-piece jumpsuit, like a flight suit with that you can't. Talk about your feet not being able to breathe. They're like, there's a whole thing. You got to get into it.
You really hated them, didn't you?
Oh my God. Yeah. I zipped my dick in it one time. It was a goddamn bloody, you know what I'm saying? Everybody had it happen. They probably don't pass certain requirements. If Elon Musk takes over, there won't be any regulatory agency to prevent from those kinds of zipper accidents.
No, people will have zipped dicks all across America. Infections. Amputations, probably. We will be a dickless society thanks to Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's right. And I approve of this message.
Thank
you, sir.
That's your contribution. One of the weird things about this campaign, I would like to ask your opinion about it, because you know some of these people. Because everybody's got a video camera, every strange person in the world is doing an ad. As if we gave a shit about their opinion. People are creating all this content.
Yeah.
And they're like, and one after another, I'm seeing people going, I endorse Kamala Harris. Like, I'm glad they endorse Kamala Harris. But really, dude, do we care?
It depends on who the person is.
Yeah, I understand. But what I'm saying is some of the people I don't care.
I'm thinking of prominent people, if that's what you're talking about. Some people who I've never heard of, they're just people on TikTok. I'm like, I don't know who this person is, but I like what they're saying. Sometimes I like that, but like Billy Eichner, the gay comedian actor, like he made like a 3-minute plea, and I cared what he had to say because I felt like it might resonate with maybe young gay men or young white gay men or something. I don't know, that might be on the fence.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just down to, hey kid, get off my lawn at this point. But in other words, I'm Jen Jones. I've been told I'm Jen Jones. I'm not Boomer, although I'm a Boomer. And
because why? Because you think that not everybody should be espousing their opinion because they have.
No, it's because I'm from New Jersey. I'm a little prickly to begin with, and I don't give a fuck. And there are all these people out there who are like, here's my opinion. And I'm like, keep your fucking opinion to yourself. I don't care about your opinion. You're not qualified to have an opinion.
That's right.
You're not qualified to share your opinion. And you think you are, and you're looking into the camera and being all sincere, blah, 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 blah. And keep it to yourself. Now, it's easy for me. I just block them or I tune them out. But they still annoy me. And
I want you to next time, send it over to me, and then it'll be gone from you. I'll deal with it from that point on.
Yeah, no, you'll deal with it. You're so nice. You deal with people who are assholes all the time that I can't stand.
Yeah.
I constantly, I'm going to go do this thing. Then I read, it was with an asshole. And that's Pete. He's a saint.
Yeah. I like a lot of people, even those I don't like.
Well, that's why you're a successful person.
We'll see about
that. That's why I'm like a curmudgeon. I'm like sitting here in a cave. I've just moved into a new cave, and I'm like, damn you, world. I'm so sick of you.
It's one of the reasons why I love your perspective, both at the Substack, at Deep State Radio, and whenever I get the opportunity to fire upon you my curiosity. So
I really should have named my Substack "Get Off of My Lawn."
I can't believe that's not taken.
I don't know. Maybe it is taken.
You should write.
It would be a good name. It would be a good name for Substack.
You should definitely write a piece titled "Get Off My Lawn," sharing some of these frustrations.
Yeah, I had a friend who came to me and they just said, it was another Jewish guy in his 60s like me, and he said, "Let's do a podcast called Altacockers, and it'll be like just two old Jewish guys sitting on a bench talking about the world, complaining about the world." And I was like, that's the last thing I want to hear.
Well, it is what all those shows are, though. That's what every sports show is. It's what a lot of political shows are. That's what drives the
most
ratings.
Influential media development of the past 30 years, if you want my opinion, and I think this is about to change, but the past 30-year period is ESPN. And ESPN.
Yep.
So cable news, all these other entities, they all decided they wanted to be like ESPN. They cover the news like ESPN. They do the banter like ESPN. It has influenced everything. And from ESPN came all these sports talks. So now you've got this bizarre phenomenon, just to carry my point further point, where like Sean Hannity has Stephen A. Smith on.
Yeah.
Like talking about Stephen A. Smith's views on politics. Yep. Stephen A. Smith is wrong about his chosen subject, sports. Why all he is loud. Why on earth and he knows basketball. He doesn't know anything about football, but he has opinions on football. He has opinions on baseball. He talks about he doesn't know shit about those things.
At least he's a black guy that Hannity will have on that will sometimes confront him on issues around race. And
I see you're looking at the silver lining, man. I love that about you.
But Will Cain did that, and a lot of other people have done that, switch back and forth from sports to politics. Mediums lend themselves to each other for sure. You got to have a strong opinion on who's good and who's bad.
Yeah, but then you had Nick Bosa last night on the football game, popping onto the camera and saying, "Look, I'm wearing a MAGA hat." And then,
what did you think of that? That really bothered me because I always have this weird view that white athletes that play with predominantly or a lot of black players throughout their career, college and pro, and are intimate with them, travel with them, share a lot of times with them. They're on a team. Like, it's weird that. He must not think that it's racist, obviously, but I wonder what the black players think or if they care. I thought a lot about that dude jumping in front of the camera, a white San Francisco 49ers football player with his "Make America Great Again" hat on live TV.
Look, when you were in high school, you knew football players, right? Were you a football player? Football players in high school. They were meatheads. Why do we expect that football players to have devoted their whole lives to it, to the exclusion of everything else, and are flirting with CTE, are really going to be the people that we should follow their intellectual lead? We shouldn't. But there are plenty of people out there in the MAGAverse in professional sports because very Southern, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, all these guys.
The kicker, Harrison Butker.
Or Danica Patrick. I used to like at Formula One sports.
Yeah.
And then she's like on it, and I was like, oh, there's Danica Patrick. Oh, that's nice. Now, the whole portion of the broadcast where Danica Patrick's on, I won't watch it. I don't watch Guy Fieri anymore because Guy Fieri is MAGA. And I'm just like, I think these issues are so big. I'm not going to patronize. I canceled my Washington Post subscription, even though I have many friends who work there. Because there has to be a commercial consequence for people who are only thinking in terms of money when they do these kinds of things.
Yes.
And the same is true with these shows. I want the message to go out. If you hire somebody who is anti-democracy, racist, misogynist, bad for the country, I noticed. People should notice.
Fully agree. Canceled my subscription too. All right. I'll let you go. Wish me happy birthday.
When's your birthday?
Halloween.
Happy birthday.
Any advice on my final year of my 40s? I'll be 49.
I had an aunt who was born on Halloween, and she was visiting. She was like 86, and she visited London, and she crossed the street near Piccadilly Circus. She got run over by a garbage truck because she was looking in the wrong direction. And so my advice for you as a fellow Halloween baby is to look both ways when you cross the street.
I wasn't expecting that. I'm so sorry for your loss.
It was like 30 years ago, but she was the only other person I knew who was born on Halloween.
Wow. I will definitely be.
Just look, but in London particularly, you got to look both ways.
Thank you very much. That was really important wisdom for me in this final year of my 40s.
I remember watching the Johnny Carson show like a billion years ago, and Baron Hilton was on the show. And he was this kind of older, distinguished man. And Johnny Carson was like, you run hotels around the world. You've lived a long life. What have you learned? What are the lessons you've learned? And he said, put the shower curtain inside of the bathtub. That's good. That's useful. That's actually useful advice.
So many simple things that go a long way and really life.
These are the main things these are the things we learn. By the time we're really
important. I think it's important for people in their 40s and 50s to have friends, especially of the same gender, 10 or 20 years older, good friends, because I learn a lot from men about kind of things that they did right or wrong in their 50s and 60s.
I'll tell you something very honestly, because I am 19 years older than you, 18 years older. I turned 50. I wrote my first really substantial book. I've written 8 or 9, 10 since then. I started doing media in a serious way when I turned 50. My more successful businesses post 50. Most of the successes that I had in life post 50. I ultimately found the woman that I loved, and I've been with her for 10 years. And I never expected that would actually happen in my life. All that was post 50. For me, post 50 has been spectacularly good, and good in every. I'm a much better tennis player now than I was 30 years ago.
I was going to ask you how your back feels.
But I feel really good. But all I can say is, this can be the beginning of the best of Pete Dominic.
Yeah, I'm going to work on a book. That's for sure. I don't know if it's going to be any good, but.
You should definitely work on a book. You've got a great voice and great observations, and you've been out there and you've done interesting things with interesting people.
I appreciate that inspiring advice, and happy to hear that was the case for you and is the case for you. So.
I think it's the case for a lot of people. But 50 is the new 48, something like that.
I'll take it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, there he goes, David Rothkopf. Go subscribe to that Substack right now. Tell him I sent you. Give me the referral. It's rothkopf.substack.com or Need to Know. Check it out. Read everything he's writing at the Daily Beast. Get his books. Listen to him on Deep State Radio and all the rest. Follow him on social media, on Twitter specifically, where he's still doing great work, in my opinion. All right, now it's time to get to Jared Yates Sexton, who you can also follow on Twitter. You can listen to on his podcast, The Muckrake Podcast. You can read his Substack, Dispatches from a Collapsing State. Get his books. It was great to catch up with Jared. Let's do it right now. Jared Yates Sexton is back, and he's the first person to comment really on the pumpkin I've got in my studio here. Thank you for caring about this time of year.
I'm a big Halloween guy. I'm also an October birthday, and so I populate the entire month with spookiness. But I will say, I do appreciate your pumpkin because I'm currently in a war with squirrels. Who have eaten so many of my pumpkins at this point. It is a very, very fraught situation that I am.
Now you grew up shooting squirrels, I'm guessing.
No, I've never been the type to shoot. I mean, I shoot guns, don't get me wrong, but I've never been a hunting type. I'm too soft of a heart.
Yeah, me too. I shot a bird once. I've talked about that plenty of times here.
That sounds like a big moment in your life that you're still struggling with, and I'm sorry.
I feel like that bird is still on my shoulder, just judging me and responsible for any bad thing that happens in my life. He just there.
I think the
shaking
bird's
my head.
proud of you.
You think the bird's proud of me?
I think the bird is proud of the man you've become. I think throughout your life, what we have watched is an unfurling of a narrative in which you have done well by that bird.
I don't know. Usually I'm the more optimistic one in our situation, in our conversations, but I feel like that bird's family is still following me around wherever I live. They're there just chirping away, just in cold blood, you killed our mother.
Generational trauma. That's what we're here to discuss.
You know, the truth is I do really feel terrible about taking that bird's life that way, electing to do that at that moment. But I eat animals. So it's just, you're only further away from the slaughter, but you're still devouring them and supporting their mass production and execution. So, how really badly.
As a longtime fan, supporter, and listener of Stand Up with Pete Dominic, can you please pivot after the election to every episode starting with a discussion about this bird and then bringing it into the larger political circle? Can we do that?
It shouldn't be hard because those birds are always, always there. So let's get after it. Lots to talk with you about in just a few days before the election, Jared. What is your general disposition in feeling and odds? You're a uniquely interesting person to ask this question about, what you are kind of predicting to have happen. I've been bold as to say that I think that Kamala Harris might win significantly because of the get out the vote operation, specifically because of that, but I have no real idea. The polls are obviously close, but I don't pay that much attention to them because it matters who votes.
I'm itchy, is what I am. I'm itchy. It's a little bit of a restless feeling. I'll say this: what you just said about polls, no one should pay attention to polls anymore. They are just absolute scattershot, throwing darts in the dark. Like, that entire institution has been completely corrupted. Don't even worry about polls, for that matter. Like, what we are looking at right now is a really, really strange situation. We don't know where this thing is going to go. Personally, I think that there is an entire slew of different possibilities. I could see Kamala Harris walking away with this thing with a massive electoral victory. I could see her winning very narrowly and actually legal challenges and basic fuckery taking it away from her. And I could see Donald Trump winning outright. I mean, literally at this point, I could be convinced any way, shape, or form of where this election will go, which is not a comfortable place to be, which I think is one of the unfortunate things we have to admit.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you're saying it that way because it's interesting to hear your view on it. So I obviously want to ask you specifically about the effect that billionaires have had on this election. I've been covering this issue actually since Citizens United was decided by the Supreme Court, when unlimited amounts of money could start pouring into campaigns. Before that, there were actual good faith efforts to create campaign finance reform by John McCain and Senator Feingold at one point, and other efforts as well. But given the fact that there seemingly are no rules, for years now we've had basically just a few people affecting campaigns, especially on the right. You've got plenty of billionaires on the left that support Democrats. But, I mean, I remember at one point you had Rick Santorum that was like running for president with one donor. Sheldon Adelson, I think, funded Ted Cruz exclusively, things like that. But it's different now because Elon Musk is so involved and he's the richest man in the world and he's so famous. You've been writing about this. You've been talking about this. Is it different? Has it always been this bad?
It's always been very bad. And for the record, what you just brought up in terms of dark money, like it needs to be one of our major issues on top of getting rid of the Electoral College. Like, these are actual discussions that should be had right now, that should be fueling movements, populist movements that aren't taking place. What Elon Musk is doing, though, is unprecedented, perhaps in its scope of ambition. Like, he has literally bought the campaign of Donald Trump. I know it. You know it. People listening know it. Donald Trump is, first of all, not even the same candidate he was in 2020. Most certainly not the candidate he was in 2016. This is basically a shambling, decaying corpse that is only capable of getting up and talking about the dangers of illegal immigrants. He can't do anything else. Elon Musk has bought that campaign. He bought J.D. Vance's way onto the ticket. Him and Peter Thiel basically funded this entire thing. And now, immediately after he bought J.D. Vance on there and pledged at least $100 million, if not more, to Donald Trump's entire operation, Donald Trump would then go on talking about crypto, would go on talking about AI, and has now promised to create a non-cabinet, democratically unaccountable position for Elon Musk to have complete and unchecked power over the U.S. budget, which, by the way, controls everything. He has now put himself in a position to more or less be an unelected oligarchical controller of the Trump administration that could possibly come into fruition. It is a 5-alarm fire that barely anyone is actually talking about.
Part of the issue with money in campaigns is wealthy people, even at the local town level, much less the city and state level, they donate to campaigns in hopes that they'll get favors back, maybe a contract. And maybe it's on the up and up and it looks decent and they're the only one who could bid it or whatever. But we understand how money and corruption works. But to have one guy, I mean, basically all these donors, they want taxpayer money to come to them for their projects, for their contracts. But to have one guy over all of the money and how it gets distributed, because you said he'd be in charge of the budget. He'd be like this regulator and trying to find out where money goes and waste and fraud. I forget what he called himself, what job that he would want. But the idea that he would have so much influence and has had so much influence, that really is different than anything we've seen ever in the history of America, even in the Gilded Age.
Yeah, and one of the things that we used to see is we would see all these oligarchical robber baron figures who basically controlled every facet of our economy and, had incredible power through all of these bosses and party systems, right? But you never saw an individual put themselves in such a position the way Musk has with Donald Trump. And I know, listen, it was an incredible slog, and nobody really wants to go listen to Elon Musk and Donald Trump talk for an hour and a half or 2 hours. But if you want to understand the vastness of this problem and the threat that we're actually facing, and by the way, this should have been something that Kamala Harris was screaming from the rooftops, and Democrats were as well. Go and listen to that original Twitter space where Musk and Trump were talking. And what you will see is one individual talk his way into a position of unimaginable power. Oh. And Donald Trump simply being like, yeah, okay, let's do that. And since then, it has become one of the platform principles of the Trump campaign.
I didn't realize that during that interview on Twitter that had to malfunction, right? But between Trump and Musk, that Musk did one of those things that you can often see happen to Donald Trump all the way back on The Apprentice. You watch him be convinced of a thing and then basically hand out a job. That's how he makes kind of decisions and snap choices that in this case affect, the entire planet. Is that what you're saying happened?
Yeah, it happened in real time. And I have to tell you, the yelp that I let out, I was driving at the time, I was traveling, and I heard it happen. I was like, holy shit, this is bad. And then you hear Trump warm to it. And since then, because of the ungodly amount of money that Musk has pumped into this campaign, what you have heard since then is that Trump now basically there's hardly a speech that goes by where he doesn't promise that to his supporters, basically pledging fealty to Trump. To Musk. So what we've now seen is that Trump has essentially become a puppet of Elon Musk, who, and this is a weird thing to wrap your head around, becoming a billionaire in this modern era, it has to do with redistribution and the way that our entire system has been corrupted. I think truly the way to become a trillionaire is to essentially merge yourself with the federal apparatus, which is what Musk is trying to do at this point.
Sure, because you get federal contracts worth billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah, which also leads to people like, I don't know, Jeff Bezos pressuring the Washington Post not to endorse because he doesn't want to endanger his contracts. And we've reached this point where after decades of these billionaires and these infrastructure oligarchs who have made themselves essential components of the operating of the U.S. federal government, you are now seeing them not only corrupt, but you're also seeing some of them become way more flamboyant in the way that they're pushing it, and others who are capitulating because they don't want to put at risk these giant multi-billion-dollar projects.
I had this weird moment yesterday where I was thinking, listen, we're at a place where unfortunately maybe we don't need a Washington Post or a New York Times or an LA Times, but I feel like we still do need major institutions like that, certainly ones that have been around a long time, but they just can't make the kind of money that they need to operate, and so a lot of them become lost leaders, or they're not profitable. And so you need a billionaire to fund them, but a good one that doesn't interfere, so that you can still have this robust news gathering source, this ethically journalistic, product be put out. But the truth is, there is no such thing. The billionaire wants something, and both the LA Times and the Washington Post are owned by billionaires, and they're preemptively preventing the endorsement of Kamala Harris because, as you said, they're worried about their contracts. You mentioned Jeff Bezos and Amazon. I guess this other guy is a drug manufacturer, and he's got to have ins at the FDA, get all his drugs approved. You can only imagine what them having so much control over government would mean, or why they're hedging their bets. Say more about the newspapers.
Well, I'll go ahead and say this first of all. A good billionaire is the biggest oxymoronic statement that could possibly ever be made, right? Like, you don't end up becoming a billionaire.
Fully agree.
You don't end up becoming a billionaire because you have benevolent.
Thank you. Yes, no, I don't think they should exist. I think I'm against it being legal that any one person has that much concentrated wealth. There's got to be a problem. But go ahead. Sorry. Yes.
Well, when it comes to newspapers, I want to point out, like, a Washington Post endorsement of Kamala Harris isn't going to hand her the election. Neither is an endorsement by the Los Angeles Times. What these things are they are markers of a larger problem and capitulation that's taking place, which is that we have allowed so much redistribution of wealth to a tiny, tiny fraction of our citizenry, creating these oligarchs in waiting. So, for instance, the owner of the Los Angeles Times, it's very funny. In 2016, when Trump won, Pete, he was immediately going out to Trump Tower asking Trump for a cabinet position, right? Like, not only is he worried about, like, FDA approval of things, like, this is a person who wants to get their hands in the actual functioning of government. When it comes to Jeff Bezos, it's not just
name is Patrick Soon-Shiong. He's a South African American businessman and investor.
Yes. And on top of that, Jeff Bezos, who has made himself one of the main components of the functioning of the government and also our space program, which has been completely and utterly privatized, which is part of what Elon Musk is interested in anyway. Like, what has happened is that Donald Trump has now been able, and you've seen it, he's been able to threaten legal action against anybody who helps Kamala Harris and or funds her campaign. So as a result, in the past, that used to be like, screw off, like, we're not going to listen to you. Now the state of play has changed to the point where the billionaires are starting to go ahead and put their chips in. We're seeing it with a whole new generation of tech fascists. We're seeing it with all the people who now enjoy government contracts and becomes a large part of their largesse. And so what we're seeing is that this project is continuing to grow and mutate, which has brought us to this unfortunate point.
This guy, the Patrick Soon-Shiong, he met privately with Donald Trump during his 2016-17 presidential transition in an unsuccessful attempt to obtain a position in the administration. In case anybody wanted me to fact check Jared, there it is right there. And he also voted for Hillary Clinton, or was a major donor to Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. The bottom line is these guys are kind of unprincipled. They'll play all sides to get cozy with the administration. Crazy. Two South African billionaires in this case, having so much influence right now, and not to mention the Adelsons and so many others that we can name, the Koch brothers over the years. And you have some that donate to Democrats, but the issue there is often they're donating not for their own financial interests often, and Democrats overwhelmingly would support all kinds of reforms. That's the thing I always like to say when people say it's like a duopoly. I'm like, no, Democrats overwhelmingly would love to reform campaign finance reform, would love to repeal Citizens United or amend it. But we can't. I mean, it's the situation is the situation. All this money, Jared, in politics doesn't get us anywhere good. That's for sure. Not the public.
No, it doesn't. And the one thing I keep pointing back to, and I understand I bring a pretty critical eye that sounds at times like really pessimistic to this stuff. We have been in this position before. In the early 20th century, we were in another situation with the oligarchs, robber barons. It took a populist movement that is now called the progressive movement. People coming together to say, hey, guess what? We deserve to vote on senators. Women deserve a right to vote. We should change the way that this corrupt system works. That has to be one of the focuses of all of this. And listen, You look at all these polls and they say immigration or the economy are the number one, number two issues or whatever. The space in the debate has been ceded to the Republican Party. That's the problem here, is that this election has been on the terms of Donald Trump and the GOP. Like, what we need to act, and you'll notice we're not talking very much about the Supreme Court. Like, not only was the Supreme Court stolen, but they are carrying out a project on behalf of the people you and I are talking about, dismantling democracy and basically making corruption legal and also taking away rights, protections, and privileges. As that's happening, we're not even talking about, like, reforming the court at this point. You know, we're not even talking about, like, how we can actually, like, get rid of dark money in politics.
How could we ever be talking about any of these issues, any issues at all, climate, democracy? It's hard to talk about anything because I can't believe we're here for the third time. Yep. I can't believe this man has so much support that there is a real possibility that he could be president again. How do we talk about any of those very important consequential issues if we have to talk about this nightmare scenario, this monster of a man coming back and his awful Nazi rally? Say something about that.
Well, and by the way, your response to it, I think, is not only appropriate, but I think it's also telling. What you just had is an appropriate but activated response to the state of play that we find ourselves in. There is a very real possibility that Donald Trump will win the presidency again. A very distinct possibility that will happen, which is an existential crisis. You and I and people who are listening to this are put in danger by that possibility. As a result, what happens is there's an activated response to it, which leads to people sort of hedging their bets. It leads to, I don't know, having rallies with Cheneys and like suddenly like saying, Alberto Gonzalez supports us. That's fantastic. We're building a coalition. What it actually takes is dealing with that activated state, understanding that there is a threat, but there are ways to mitigate it. We cannot become more conservative. We have to start swinging for the fences, including talking about a Supreme Court that has a disapproval rating over 80%. Right? Like, if you actually take a look at issues that serve the Democratic Party and serve the well-being of the electorate, it's not what's been discussed.
Okay, so just to be clear, what I'm hearing you say then is you don't really love the strategy of campaigning with Republicans and trying to appeal to Republicans as opposed to at least talking about issues that would animate and activate the rest of us or progressives or however you want to see. You think there should be more talk about that, and I'll let you answer that. But I feel like none of that really matters. I feel like a lot of these speeches don't matter. I feel like the most important thing that I've heard in politics in the last, few weeks is Michelle Obama and anybody else, but Michelle Obama the other night talking about character and what this means for girls and your daughters. Like I just want to hear just that message about that man. But you're saying you think it would make a difference if she was out on the campaign trail talking about the Supreme Court and reforming it or anything else that would, I guess, activate people who aren't already fired up?
Yeah, I think the Democratic Party has a long and unfortunate history of approaching the state of play where it is versus where it could be. Mm-hmm. This was at the heart of the Democratic Party's like conservative turn in the 1990s, which was the idea there's a certain selection of voters that we can go out and get and we have to appeal. It led to the idea that you need to go out and get the quote unquote moderate voter, which at the time was defined as a woman in Ohio who, was concerned about what the Republican Party did, but she was also made a little bit uncomfortable by civil rights and reform. Right. And when you do that, what you're actually doing, it's almost like playing a road game constantly. You're going into the other arena and you're like, I'm sorry, but immigration is not the Democratic strong point. That first of all, Kamala Harris has a problem with the fact that she was charged by the Biden administration to a task that wasn't going to work.
Right.
There was no way to actually fix the border crisis because one, the border crisis is manufactured. And two, Pete, we depend on immigrants to exploit for our economy. No one wants to actually solve this. There's a bunch of grandstanding about it. And
the only solution is legislation, not executive action from the office of the Vice President of the United States.
Exactly. And so when you go out and you do that, or you go out and this has been one of the more unfortunate things, constantly talking about having the support of Goldman Sachs, constantly saying, look at the Cheneys, look at the Bushes, whoever it is. That has been ceding the battleground to the Republican Party. And I agree that character matters, but we're also in this weird liminal space now where people don't actually care about character. It sounds good. It feels good. They should care about character. What they actually want is somebody who's going to get shit done. And while Donald Trump is not a person who's going to get shit done, he is perceived by the people who support him as somebody who's not worried about graces and manners and things like that. I do think that Harris has done a good job. And by the way, I think Waltz has knocked this out of the park consistently. He's been perfectly effective in talking about this, about like, no, these people are actual creeps. By the way, when's the last time you heard the phrase weird? That was working incredibly well for months. Yeah. And it went away as they started trying to make inroads with so-called moderate Republicans. I do think recently calling him a fascist was a smart point, and I think talking about him being unhinged and unwell, I think was a good point. But a lot of the time that we have watched this race take place, it has been playing out within the field of play that the Republican Party wanted it to.
You know, I feel that the word fascist and fascism has been something that we've all been learning about now since 2015, since Trump came on the scene. It's really what helped put you on the map and your work. But of course, the historians and experts like Timothy Snyder, Heather Cox Richardson, of course, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, Kenneth C. Davis, so many people talking about this. So we've all been using this rhetoric, this language. You've used this word for years and years now. And now Jake Tapper and Kamala Harris call it what it is because Trump's own former chief of staff called it fascism. I'm basically saying once conservative Republicans who worked for the president went on the record, said, dude's a fascist, military guys who know a little bit about fascism because they all got to study it, especially at West Point. Dude's a fascist. Now everybody in corporate mainstream media is saying it. Leaders in the Democratic Party are saying it. But you've been saying it. I've been saying it. And others have been studying it and writing about it and warning about it for years now. Fair to say?
Yeah, it is. The problem, though, is the essence of fascism and authoritarianism is not well understood in this country. I mean, listen, I'm going to lay my cards on the table, my background. I still remember as a child listening to people within my family and community saying out loud, Adolf Hitler had some good ideas, right? He just went too far or he did whatever. There is a strain of authoritarianism in this country that has always been there, and we've got caught up in these like conventional comforting fairy tales that like America is anti-fascist because we fought Germany instead of the fact that we inspired Germany. And by the way, Donald Trump held this Madison Square Garden rally, which brings to mind 1939, where the German-American Bund had their own rally with over 20,000 people in front of a giant picture of George Washington with swastikas surrounding him. This country is not as bothered by actual fascism as it pretends to be. The problem is that the leaders and media members who should be educating about this and the actual history of America, they're made really uncomfortable by it. The problem is thinking that simply saying fascist is going to somehow or another make this better. There are millions, tens of millions of Americans who want a fascist. They literally want authoritarianism because they believe the system is so far gone, that's the only way to fix it. So instead of offering an alternative about how to fix it, as opposed to fascism, there is a fear of actually dealing with what it is. So it's left America sort of adrift, and it's allowed Donald Trump and the people who back him and control him to take advantage.
Yeah. You grew, and your family, you heard people say Hitler had good ideas.
All the time. Absolutely.
Oh, that's terrible. I heard my dad talk about Hitler one time. He was like, I don't like Hitler. Okay.
Well, I mean, listen, luckily he didn't get canceled for that hot take. The people that I actually did hear speak truthfully about Adolf Hitler were the people who fought in World War II.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
Everybody else got caught up in this conventional story, which, by the way, obscures the fact, again, that America inspired the fascists and the Nazis. They supported them by the millions. There was a real possibility in the United States, United Kingdom, and France of fascism taking over. And then on top of it, they have neglected the fact that America has relied on former fascists and dictators in order to control countries that we wanted to exploit. The fact that we're not having an actual conversation about what these things are and how we've gotten to this point, instead we focused on Donald Trump as an individual, that has left us pretty defenseless and, again, adrift.
I feel like a strong man is very attractive when you think government and all of our institutions are so broken. Is that something that history has Because I do feel, I try very hard to understand what people see in the idea of authoritarianism. And I'm not sure that they know that they're supporting authoritarianism, fascism. I would argue they probably don't know any of those words. But what they see is somebody who will fix everything, will solve everything, as opposed to right now, which is everything is broken, everything is corrupt, nothing works, the trains don't run on time. Why is that? Why it's so appealing? People are blaming all of the maybe wrong. Partially right, I suppose. Your complaints aren't completely wrong about why things don't work and so on. But there's just this hatred for government in America, especially has been since Reagan, for sure. It didn't start with Reagan, but he made it popular, right? When he said government's not solution, it's the problem. Is that how it works? This attraction to authoritarianism? It's like, we just need this guy.
Yeah, and I think Tucker Carlson, and I don't say this often, he did us an extreme favor the other day. He gave a speech, Turning Points, in Duluth, Georgia. And I don't know if you saw this, but he got on stage and he was like, the family falls apart, and then daddy gets home, and he's going to spank the naughty daughter and make sure that she follows the rules.
Huh.
What's actually taking place when it comes to authoritarianism is it's a psychological response by a bunch of people who came from patriarchal, abusive households and communities.
Right.
And what they've been installed with is the idea that unless you have a strong, abusive father figure to put things right, everything falls apart. Right. So what we're actually seeing is a complete psychosexual disaster of a situation take place along the right. The issue is this, and by the way, like we've talked about Steve Bannon, your former colleague, friend, coworker, all of that. Bannon, whenever he talks about what went wrong in this country, he's actually correct in terms of elite redistribution of wealth and what happened particularly.
A lot of times, people are right at saying what's broken or what's wrong, what the problem is, who they blame, or what they say was the cause. I feel.
The issue right now is that our current political system, it has two voices. One voice is saying everything is wrong and it needs fixed, but it needs to be an authoritarian solution. The Democratic Party, because of this, has been put in a position of promising to conserve what we still have. Right? So what actually happens is a lot of that populist sentiment, and they're correct, things are broken and shit does need fixed. The problem is that the solution that's being put forward is faux populism. It's authoritarian in nature, and it always comes down to whether or not the right-wing authoritarian solution to the actual problems is what's going to win out over vigorous, actually populist and actually effective solutions. And that's currently what's playing out.
I think women are going to save us.
I hope so. I wish they didn't have to. I mean, I'm not a woman, but I have to imagine you have to be exhausted as shit being asked to continually save this country and it being put on them. But yeah, if Kamala Harris ends up winning this, it's going to be because not only did women do the work because they've been outraged by how they've been treated, but that a lot of women who, by the way, are married to a lot of people supporting Donald Trump and a lot of those patriarchal households you and I are talking about go into the voting booth and betray their patriarchal bond. Like that's one of the few ways that we're actually going to win this thing.
There's three things that have made far too big of, I think, an impact in this election and have converted, so many on the right and a lot in liberal mainstream, including in our school board fight. And I just want to go through them real quick with you. One is trans kids, trans anything. The other is immigration. And, of course, the other is the cost and price of things. And going back to Steve Bannon or anybody on the right, being able to, we can all say things have cost more money, but what we don't agree on is why and how to fix it, or if we can. But just on the issue first of trans anything and everything, this has been such a major issue and such an animating issue, and people believe a lot of shit that's not true. Trump has actually been saying you send your kid to school as one gender and come back as another. I mean, that's the most extreme. Megyn Kelly was on Real Time the other night, your favorite show and your favorite guy, with Bill Maher.
Never miss an episode, Pete.
And they both agreed that was a much bigger issue than it's being given credit and credence to. It certainly is the reason why we lost the school board election. They are hammering this one kid, 2 kids, 3 kids, and really influencing people who aren't even necessarily that political by making them believe that your kid they can be anything they want, including whatever gender they want. And not only that, it's encouraged and groomed at school. When they come to school, they're told you can be whatever you want to be today. Jared, I want to get your take on the transition and how much you think it's mattered.
I think it's mattered a lot. And once again, unfortunately, I think the communications space has been ceded to the Republican Party. One of my great disappointments, and there are quite a few, and again, I want to reiterate, I'm supporting Kamala Harris for president for a variety of reasons. But one of my great disappointments has been the disappearance of support for gay and trans people. You hardly ever hear about this because they see it as a losing issue. But quite frankly, what needs to be pushed and what needs to be communicated is that these people are being targeted. They're being harassed, they're being attacked, they're being abused, they're being villainized. And you brought up immigration. I think two of the missed opportunities in this was standing up vigorously for gay and trans rights, and also when the Springfield, Ohio shit started unfurling, the Democratic Party told strategists, consultants, and surrogates, don't talk about this thing. Let it go away. It will simply, dissipate into the ether. What actually needed to happen was a robust correction and defense of these people. And I feel like that was a missed opportunity, and it has been allowed, unfortunately, for the Republican Party to define all of these issues. There's absolutely nothing here in terms of like transphobia that kids are being groomed. You have to stand up and say that is not what's happening. This is patriarchal insecurity, and quite frankly, it's hate mongering. And unfortunately, that space I think has been ceded.
Anything else about the cost of things or any other issues that you think have made a major impact in this campaign, whether they should have or shouldn't have? You've been always good to point out things that you wish were focused on more, and I think I agree with most of them. But anything else?
Gaza and the actions of Israel. It has been a mess, and I think there's a larger geopolitical context for this. Quite frankly, the tail is in charge of the dog here. Like, Israel has figured out, the same way Saudi Arabia has figured out, that this new bipolar world of the U.S. versus China, Israel understands that if America stops arming it and giving it money, it will go to Russia. That's what it will do. It's already established that. It's already basically baked into the cake, which has left Joe Biden an inability to actually rein them in. And Kamala Harris has been stuck with the Biden doctrine of this. This, I think, is going to have major effects, not just in places like Michigan, but also I think it has decreased the number of people who are necessarily going to vote. And I think the Democratic Party, quite frankly, is in real danger of losing a generation of voters, which I think is possibly going to lead to a realignment that I don't even know that we can wrap our heads around right now.
Well, I hope you're wrong about that. Before we wrap up, what are your plans over the next few days up until the election? I'd love to have you stop by. I'm probably going to do all day Panic Fest, like stay on a link for people to come by and just have some of our favorite voices and commentators come by. What are you doing?
Well, I would love to do that. What I'm going to do, and I'm actually going to make a podcast or post about this in the next couple of days. I think what I would recommend people do is take the next few days and center and regulate as much as humanly possible. Figure out the things that matter to you, what gives you hope, what gives you joy, what you believe in, what your actual principles are. Because if the shit does hit the fan, and there's a possibility that the shit's going to hit a fan, we cannot afford doomerism and pessimism and nihilism. If Donald Trump does end up winning this election, and there is a distinct possibility that will happen, we're going to need people ready to fight. There's no capitulation. There's no giving up. So I think the next few days are about fortifying ourselves and preparing for the worst and hoping for the best.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you. It's great to catch up. Jared Yates Sexton, always awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
There you go, Jared Yates Sexton. Go subscribe to his Substack, listen to the podcast, and get his books. Let him know you heard him here. David Rothkopf, Jared Yates Sexton. I can't speak. It's late. And you're the best. You're the bumblebee that listened all the way to the end after I had a glass of wine because I was so frustrated that I lost the opening of the show I'd worked so hard on. I cannot do it without your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic now. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I've got great conversations with John Fugelsang and Dino Badala coming up. Also, Glenn Kirshner and Michael Cohen is back, and more, so much more coming your way this week. Hope to see you at the Hangout on Thursday night. Philly tonight. Love you. Bye-bye. John Carroll taking us out.
Knees, you gotta stand up, stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. shines on light. You gotta stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.